Okay. Councillor MacDonald.
I'm present.
Councillor Argyle.
I'm here.
Dr. Maggie Bochel.
Here.
Councillor Aitchison.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor Cox. Councillor Cox, have you got your microphone switched off?
Yeah. Sorry, I am here, and if I disappear, my broadband keeps cutting out, so I'll come back in just to let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Yeah.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Present.
Colin Allenach.
Here.
Jerry Donald.
Present.
And Ian Ross.
Present.
Thank you. I'll hand back to Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks very much for that, Mark. Can I maybe start with a public recognition of Stephen Archer, who has given his intention that he's retiring at the end of this year from Aberdeenshire Council. For those of you who, well, I think we'll all know Stephen Archer on the board. He joined Aberdeenshire in 2011 and he replaced Ian Gabriel and had that real ability of recognising cross-cutting areas that was of Nestrans interest. So he's leaving at the end of the year, but I thought it would be good to ask the board to extend our thanks to Stephen, because he really has brought an expertise and knowledge about roads and infrastructure to the board over time. And he was able to give that sort of breadth of understanding and ability, as I said, across areas that we were interested in. But he also, brought a lot of new ideas to the board. We wish him a very long and happy retirement, and Ewan is going to take over in his place at the moment until we hear from Aberdeenshire about the permanent replacement of Mr. Archer. So thank you very much, Stephen. Listening or watch this later. Thank you for that. So any declarations of interest, colleagues? I'm not seeing any hands going up, so let's just move on then to the minute of our last board meeting, which we have in front of us. So for accuracy, on page 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. Can I get agreement from the board that that's a true and correct minute, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Super. Thanks very much. We then move on to the usual budget matters, and I'll ask Chris Smith to introduce this topic. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the Partnership's 2021 monitoring and outturn forecast position. Appendix 1 attached to the report sets out a summary of spend to the end of October 2020. In line with previous reporting, expenditure is lower than expected, but work programmes are continuing to progress where possible, obviously taking into account the impact of COVID on working practices. You'll notice there are no further environments proposed at this stage following a number of approvals at the last board. However, the situation will continue to be monitored closely and suggestions presented to the board if necessary next year. In addition, you'll note from the Covenant report that work is progressing on agreeing the implications of the Transport Scotland Act between all parties, and a finalised report will be presented to the board in February. Chair, 2 recommendations for the board to approve, and if there's any questions, myself or Nestrans staff on the call can assist. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Any questions, members? No indication of hands popping up. So can, on the recommendations on page 11, to note the monitoring position and forecast, and to instruct the director to report back to the next meeting in February. on the implications of the Transport Act. Can we agree there? Splendid. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. On to Director's Report. That's for you, Rob, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly run through, as you'll see, a good number of meetings taking place. It's been quite a busy period since the last board meeting. A couple that I would highlight, if I may. One is that the RTP chairs met last week with the Cabinet Secretary, had a good session of over an hour with Mr. Matheson, and I think it was very positive. I've had feedback that he was very pleased that it wasn't about criticisms or politics or local pet schemes. It was very much about how can regional transport partnerships work with Transport Scotland, work with local authorities to try and ensure that we're all towards outcomes that have been identified and agreed. The second one I wanted to highlight was in Appendix 1, the minute of the Bus Alliance. Members will recall from the last board meeting that we indicated George Mayer had retired from his position at CPT and his Nestrans Board position, but it also meant that he had stepped down as chairman of the North East Bus Alliance. I'm pleased to be able to say that we have found a suitable replacement. I did think it was going to be a really difficult position to find someone with the expertise, knowledge and background that George had brought to the position. But we've identified a Mr. Robert Andrew, who previously worked with Stagecoach, not least in the northeast of Scotland, is still involved through the Scottish City Link, but it was actually a position nominated by First Group and supported unanimously by the Bus Alliance board. So Robert Andrew is going to join the Bus Alliance from the 1st of January, and I think will be a real advocate and a champion for public transport, someone who knows the Northeast and knows the bus industry inside out. So I'd like to just bring that to members' attention for information. Hopefully we might be able to get Mr. Andrew to come and speak to the board at some point in the future once he's got his feet under the table, to give us his views on buses and public transport and how we can work together with the operators for the benefit of passengers. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much. Have we got any questions at all on the Director's Report? A couple of, no. Okay, Doug. Right, in that case, if we could note the report, and that would be splendid. Thank you. Then on to COVID-19 report. This is one that we've seen on the agenda recently, and over to Paul Finch for that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the introduction. Again, we've seen this kind of report over the last couple of boards. The last board had a discussion, and actually that the board offered some suggestions as to how the information might be improved. So hopefully I've been able to respond to that request with this particular paper. What I've sought to do is to look at the traffic levels in the area. Generally, they're about 80% of the pre-COVID levels across the region. We've looked at public transport levels, and they have reduced by 80%. So they're only about 20% of the previous levels around. We're suspecting there's quite a lot of lift sharing going on throughout the region at the moment, possibly a lot of pick-up drop-offs, and that has an additional impact on the road network, because for any return trip on the public transport network, you might having 4 trips on the road network. We've looked at some of the trends on active travel, both walking and cycling, and the counters indicate strong support for or strong activity on those areas which are recreational, but there has also been some growth over the last year on the more utility routes, perhaps associated more with commuting. we looked in the market research work that we've been doing and a little bit more on commuting patterns and what's been happening there. Generally, what we're seeing is that more people are going back to work in the previous 7 days, and more people are making more frequent trips to their workplace. I think there's also some indications that less people are on furlough as well in the most recent data, and some of this trend might be indicating while we're in the traffic data, we're seeing a re-emergence of AM and PM peaks in the data. The market research work also continues to confirm that business people who have previously been to or undertaking business work expect a significant change or a significant reduction in actual making physical trips to do business, and there'll be a lot more reliance on the new technologies. Shopping trips, the indications are that people are going to the supermarket more often, perhaps feeling more confident about more regular shopping trips. And we also see indications, which again is probably evident of obviously more increased internet shopping, but also people stating they are more likely to shop local as well. Visiting friends and family has significantly declined across the series of market research work, again responding perhaps to the national restrictions and the messaging that we should not be in each other's houses. The attitudes towards different transport modes have remained very similar across the 6 surveys that have been completed, again indicating that people are keen to get out and walk, and again that's reflected in the walking and cycling figures that we see. Car use, again, people are happy to be driving around because they feel more safer. But obviously, just shared transport modes are more constrained in terms of people's confidence in using those and remaining safe from the virus. So I've picked out perhaps 5 key findings. More commuting. We're anticipating over the long term, perhaps a 10% reduction in commuting in terms of people working at home. All forms of public transport are remaining suppressed, and there is obviously some evidence, we think, of more informal lift sharing, people transferring off the buses to getting lift from their friends and family. People are walking and cycling more, particularly for leisure purposes, and we need to be working with companies at the appropriate time to assist them in the recovery of confidence and the recovery of patronage on those modes, because otherwise there will be unfortunate and significant impacts probably on congestion as activity levels get back to normal. So I guess that's my summary, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that, Paul. Can I ask members if they've got any questions on the content of the report or anything else around COVID? Yep, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the see what page it is. It's the page 32, just the indication of various measures that have been found on the survey.
Okay, yeah.
I'm quite interested to see that 51% are concerned that social distancing may not be in place on public transport, and that 60% feel that face coverings on public transport makes them feel a lot safer. So can you just please very briefly outline what measures are in place to guarantee distancing on public transport? And I know that First Bus have got an app that shows you how many spare seats are available. Now, whether they've gone down to a half or a third load, I don't know. But are there other measures in place, and how do they work?
Okay, I will. Good questions. One interesting thing, I'll come back with some more information here, is that some work that was being done in the University of Leeds was noticed a significant difference in those who are regularly travelling with public transport, possibly because they don't have friends to give them a lift or they don't have a car. And those people who are making regular trips to work are actually feeling quite comfortable about how the public transport is working. And the comfort and the satisfaction of people who are using the public transport network on a 5-day-a-week basis was actually, we're quite happy with how things are going. We're happy with how the measures that the bus companies and the train companies are doing. So that's a bit of information, which is new information, which we only received in the last couple of weeks. What we found is the people who were previously discretionary users of public transport, who now have an option not to use public transport, have got fears around public transport, and perhaps that's keeping them away from it. In terms of the measures that bus companies are putting in place, again, they are putting in place the advice for face coverings for those who can use it. They are blocking off seats to ensure that there is physical distancing, and they are not stopping when the bus is full, which is an inconvenience. That is obviously offset by some of the digital information that I know First Bus are putting out. I'm not too sure where Stagecoach are on that one, but I do believe that they were investigating that those particular issues. And then there's that wider information that's being put out to the public in terms of bus stops, in terms of what to expect when you get on the bus and the train networks. So the other thing that the bus operators are doing far more regularly and with far more efficiency, perhaps, is doing the deep cleaning with their fogging machines as well when they're in the depot. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Yeah, that kind of reflects, to be honest, the conversation I was having with some colleagues on Monday. And one of my councillor colleagues who uses the bus a lot felt, very comfortable about it. But somebody else had been on the bus once and had later of an evening and hadn't had such a good experience. So that very much reflected what I heard. It was interesting. I was in with other people and yourself, Paul, in a round table with Alex Hines from ScotRail, and I think the one thing about that came over to me was that he had kind of wished in the beginning that we'd been much more upfront about don't travel as a message going out there, rather than don't travel on public transport. And I think that was one of the things that people might reflect on, and might have done things differently. It's easy to do with hindsight, but that might have been different. When I was speaking last week to David Phillips from First Bus, he indicated that there was pretty good coverage. There were still some issues, but pretty good face coverage in the buses in Aberdeen compared to other cities in Scotland. But it is something that perhaps we can get some more information on through the Bus Alliance, perhaps, or other means, because I think as a board we would want to keep a really close eye on that current data gathering around public transport. And I think Philip's Councillor Bell's points around apps and so on are very pertinent. Any other questions on that? In that case, I think it's just to note that report. Can we do that, members? Thank you. And then on to 3.3, our draft annual report from last year. Oh no, yeah, that's right. Jenny Anderson's going to take us through that paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All regional transport partnerships have a statutory duty to publish an annual report after the end of each financial year and submit it to Scottish ministers and constituent councils that provide funding to them. So draft text has been prepared for the Nestrans 2019-20 annual report and is given in Appendix 1. This provides a historic overview of Nestrans' work in the last financial year, along with any transport contributions by other organisations that have also assisted with the delivery of the current regional transport strategy. Business plan information for the current financial year is also included and is reported based on the funding allocations and project proposals and the status as they stood at the start of April this year, even if this has since changed as the years progressed. The information that Nestrans is required to publish in accordance with the Public Services Reform Scotland Act should all have been included within Appendix 2 of the annual report, although I do apologise that only the Sustainable Economic Growth Statement and the Statement on Improving Efficiency, Effectiveness and Economy for 1920 were sent out with the board papers. The expenditure statement, which provides a list of financial transactions from 1920 within specified headings for public relations, overseas travel, hospitality and entertainment, external consultancy and payments over £25,000, was prepared on a separate spreadsheet, but unfortunately I forgot to paste it into the Word documents that went out with the board papers. Although they will all be added to the annual report when it's designed for publication, this information also needs to be published separately on the Nestrans website. And although it's not currently live prior to consideration by the board, I can hopefully provide a link in the chat, and just so that you can see that at the moment. That's the missing information on the expenditure statement, but that is just a factual document on the transactions that went through last financial year on the specified headings. So basically the board's been asked to consider the draft 1920 annual report and business plan for 2021, to approve the immediate publications on the website, the statements that are required on under the Public Services Reform Scotland Act 2010, approve publication of the 1920 annual report on the Nestrans website once the design has been completed, and instruct a link to the published report to be sent to Scottish ministers and the chief executives, Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council. And happy to take any questions on the contents of the draft annual report, Chair.
Thank you for that. Any questions on that draft annual report? If not, can we agree the recommendations there on page 33? And thanks for that link, which we can have a look at later. Thanks. So on to 3.4. I think that's yourself again.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Listen to me again, sorry. This report is to seek the board's approval of a revised Code of Corporate Governance for Nestrans. A code was first reported to the board and adopted in 2018, but the action plan within the recent audited annual accounts for 1920 stated that the partnership should review the code during this current financial year. So finance and legal officers within both councils have assisted Nestrans staff in the review, and we've considered the extent to which Nestrans already complies with the principles of good governance set out in the SIPFA and Solace Delivering Good Governance and Local Government Framework that was published in 2016. A revised Code of Corporate Governance has been drafted and is attached for consideration in Appendix 1, with amendments to the previous code shown in track changes so that you can easily see them. Although very little change is proposed, just a link to the latest delegated powers to the director that were approved earlier this year, and an update to the vision statement to reflect the aims agreed by the board for the next RTS 2040. The review has highlighted that the risk register has not been looked at since 2018, and that the Equalities Mainstreaming Report and Equalities Outcomes Report were last considered in 2017. So it's suggested that these form future reports back to the board. In addition to this review of the code, Nestrans will have to continue to publicly report a governance statement each year on the extent to which we've complied with our code and any planned changes. So it's therefore recommended that the board agree the revised Code of Corporate Governance for the partnership as detailed in Appendix 1, subject to any appropriate adjustments being made following your consideration. That you instruct the new Code of Corporate Governance to be published on the Nestrans website, instruct a review of our Nestrans risk register to be undertaken and reported back, and to instruct that the qualities mainstreaming report and the qualities outcomes report are updated and reported back to the board by April 2021, and instruct that a review of the code and preparation of an annual governance statement and any planned changes to the code, and to report this each year to the board as part of the annual accounts. And again, happy to take any questions on this report, Chair.
Any questions, members, for Jenny on this one? Can we agree? Thank you. On to publications and consultations. We've got a report at agenda item 4. So if we could have Kelly, please, on the cleaner air consultation.
Hi, yes. So I've pulled together a consultation response for the Cleaner Air for Scotland 2 strategy, which the Scottish Government have just recently published. Now, a lot of the things within the consultation do affect transport, and a big part of their strategy is actually to improve and decarbonise transport and reduce the amount of ICE vehicles, so petrol and diesel vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles on the roads, to try and improve air quality. As you can see, it jumps from number 8 to number 17. That's because those questions within the consultation were around things like waste and agriculture, which is obviously outside of Nestrans' remit. So I haven't answered those questions because I didn't think it was appropriate. But certainly the other ones are there. And if you're content, then we can submit that consultation response. And if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to take those.
I think any questions to that before we take in Nicky Laird on the next one? Any questions, members? Not seeing any, so perhaps Ms Laird, you could take us through the next consultation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so the second consultation is the one on free bus travel for people residents in Scotland aged under 19. Now, this wasn't a consultation on whether this should happen. It is happening. This was more regarding views on the arrangements for the new scheme. So Nestrans has pulled together a response for this. We have already submitted it because it was open until the 7th of December, but we have let them know that if the board has any changes or additional comments, we can contact Transport Scotland with this following the board meeting. The consultation itself, for the most part, we did agree with how Transport Scotland plans to take forward the under 19s free bus travel. But one thing that we did want to make clear in our response was that this isn't the only thing that needs to happen in order to help encouraging transport on buses, and that the scheme will only be of value where there's adequate bus service provision. But yeah, happy to take any further questions or comments.
Thanks very much indeed. I have my Councillor Hutchison.
Yep, it was. So there's a couple of questions. One was about response number 2. It's, do you think there might be any disadvantages to introducing free bus travel? And you've kind of outlined the concerns that you've not really stated how you get to them being disadvantages of free bus travel. Is it by virtue of being an opportunity cost, or is it by some other means that they are disadvantages of under 19s travelling for free? Just if you could maybe elaborate on that a wee bit.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just reading back the response there. I suppose the main, again, it's pushing on the fact that free bus travel alone will not help under 19s who wish to travel. So what that was highlighting was that you need to have the service available for them to be able to do it as well. If you've got someone that's living in a rural community, it's great that they can theoretically travel for free, but if there's no bus that's travelling in their area or travelling to where they want to go, then it's not of much benefit to them. I think that also connects to one of the responses further down as well, which is this can also cause further strain on operators and local authorities, because again, if you are trying to ensure that there's services there in place, if it's not commercial to do so, then you need to look at whether there's potential for support. You're also looking at, for concessionary travel, the fact that it is no better, no worse off. If you've got people that are already travelling on bus services, then that's essentially using seats without generating any more revenue and possibly generating less revenue. So it was very much that we agreed with it. Well, obviously we agree with it in principle, but that there are considerations that need to be made as well with how it works practically. I don't know if Rab wants to add anything else to that.
No, not really. I mean, exactly that point though, that yeah, the scheme is only of value if there are services. As Nikki says, rural areas, for example, we might have thought that propping up services might be important than making it free for all under 19s. Very much support the principle, but it's the ramifications and implications if people start using very busy buses, particularly if at the moment they're walking or cycling on some of these shorter journeys. What are the implications if bus services become overcrowded at certain times of day, or if there are threats to the viability of these services?
Yeah. And just a follow on, it was on question 7 as well. It just kind of, it's just maybe a small change I was hoping to see. It just says children can ride on buses now. Could it maybe be changed to children can ride on buses just now if they can afford to do so, because that's kind of the main gist behind this, especially for kind of combating poverty and the likes. That's a big thing in terms of cost, and it's certainly something that when I've heard from young folk, the cost of public transport is one of the factors as to why they don't take it. Some of them, not just that they don't want to spend the money, but they can't afford to spend that money. So that could maybe, if there's maybe a little bit scope to add that in, if it's possible.
I mean, we can definitely take a look at doing that. I did let Transport Scotland know when I submitted this that it hadn't yet been taken to board and that we may be back with further changes.
Yeah.
I'm just putting out to the rest of the board members, I certainly would be okay with that. Is there anybody minded to say anything else? I think that would be reasonable, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you.
So with that small change to go forward, Transport Scotland, can we look at the recommendations on page 106 and approve those? Thank you.
You're on mute, Councillor MacDonald.
Yep, talking to myself again. Into the last straight, I was saying we've got 3 coming together in quick succession. Perhaps you could run through those, Rab, for members, then we'll get on to the substance of the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. Item 5 is the information bulletin. Wanted to highlight to members that we have put in an application in partnership with NHS Grampian for a workplace engagement officer. In year 1, it'll be 100% funded by Nestrans from Transport Scotland, but there's an expectation of partnership funding in years 2 and 3. So it's only in principle at the moment, but I wanted to raise it with members, and we will come back at a point when we've got formal agreement for budget consideration. I think we've done a deal with NHS Grampian that they'll pick up 2/3 of the local contribution, and Nestrans would put in effectively 1/3 of the half, so a 17% contribution in years 2 and 3 and nothing in year 1. But certainly something we've been trying to encourage about getting people sustainably to the major workplaces of the hospitals and other NHS Grampian premises. We've obviously also got an appendix with the press, media and communications that have been going on since the last board meeting. And just to let you know that the Get About adverts, which were approved at the last board, have been ongoing, encouraging safer travel and talking about Christmas sustainably. So again, happy to take questions.
Any questions on agenda item 5, members? Can we note the contents of that report? Thanks. And the conferences and presentations?
Thanks, Chair. Conferences and presentations has gone a little bit quiet in the COVID months, as you can imagine. However, there is a major conference coming up called STAR, which is Scottish Transport Research. Both Kirsty and Paul in the Nestrans team have been involved in the organisation of that, and therefore we've been able to I was going to say blag. We've been offered a couple of free places. Paul will be doing a presentation on Kintor Railway Station, and Kirsty's been involved in the organisation of the conference. So two places, but they'll both be free for Nestrans officers.
Excellent, thank you for that. If we could note that information and on to the pending business report.
Thanks, Chair. A standing report letting members know of items that we intend to bring forward. Obviously, the key one will be as we move towards a finalised regional transport strategy, and also the 2 reports that Jenny mentioned relating to risk register and our equalities requirements. So they'll be coming in the new year.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Rab on that final report on this part of the agenda? Nope. In that case, can we note that report, and that's the end of the formal business for the day. So we can stop recording our